This is Alex, and welcome to Barely Braided, where we're taking a deep, deep dive into foster care, adoption, and all things parenting, even the sticky stuff. Welcome to Barely Braided Podcast. My name is Alex Ellis, and I think this is episode 35, maybe 36. I think it's about that time where I need to stop keeping track. Today, I have a lovely guest joining me all the way from Ohio. Her name is Kayla, and I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself, tell you all a little bit about her. Hey, Kayla.
Hey, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good.
Good. So tell us a little bit about your background, your family, and then your very beginning, your intro to foster care and adoption.
Sure. So my husband and I have been married almost 5 years. We have 3-year-old twins, and we started, I guess the commitment of us deciding we were going to pursue this route started almost 3 years ago, right around when the twins were born, but we really took action on it about this time last year, around when the beginning of the pandemic started. We did all of our training, our home study, and we got everything finalized. I think it was the 1st of March. So not a long journey to get there, but haven't been in it very long.
Okay, cool. So what part of Ohio do you live?
We live in the Dayton area.
Okay. So my first question, I think it's rare that you're towards the end of your pregnancy or like ready to give birth or you've just given birth. And at that point, you decide to jump into adoption or foster care. How did it happen that way?
So, gosh, this is a loaded question. So I have always known to some extent that I wanted to adopt my entire life. Short background. Not the same thing as foster care, but I was adopted by my dad. And while I don't feel like that played a huge role in me wanting to adopt, I'm sure in some subconscious level that definitely did. I've kind of always just had a big heart for the orphan. I remember there being a foster kid in our elementary class. So that was kind of when I was first introduced to the idea. And God just kept showing me foster care and adoption in the strongest and craziest ways throughout my life, to where I knew that that's what I was led to do. I had mentioned it to my husband ahead of us getting married. And I think at the time he was like, yeah, okay, sure. It wasn't like a super like, this is what I want to do with my life. 100%. Are you on board? It was right around the time the twins were arriving that I told him, hey, my next child after them, I really want to adopt. And we had that serious conversation. And he's been great. I mean, he's been on board since day one. It did not take any convincing, which was awesome. I was shaking when I told him because I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if he's just not for this or not on board? But he took a few days to process it, and he's been 100% since day one.
Oh, so before you took the training, did you also have some sort of conversation with the twins, or are they still too young at this point to really get it? I'm not really sure what happens after like 1.5 years old.
So Christian and June know that there is a sibling or siblings coming, but they don't quite get it. They kind of get that babies come from the belly. So a couple of times June, so their names are June and Christian, if I didn't already say that. June, my daughter, at times when we've talked about it, she'll touch my belly, which I'm sure is a hard concept for her to understand. But we've slowly tried to introduce them to the idea, showed them the room that we set up for our new children. And I think that they get it kind of, but it's still a little too early for them to fully grasp it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. How did you feel that the training process went?
So it was a little messy because of the pandemic. Ohio at that time had converted to online training, but then by the time we were able to get into classes, they switched back to in-person. Our coordinator at the time told us, because the classes were so limited, getting into an in-person class, I mean, the capacity was 25% of what it could be at the time, I think. before the pandemic. So he told us you could kind of do a hybrid option. You could do some in person and the rest you could do online. And the classes didn't match up. There was a whole formula for, okay, if I took this class in person, that equates to that full class and then a little bit of this class. And you had to kind of grab and take from in person and online. And at one point, when he forwarded our classes to his superior, she said, no, it's online or it's in person.
Oh,
So,
no.
yeah, we almost had to start over, and he really made a case for us, and she reluctantly let it slide.
Oh my
We would
God.
have
Yeah, that
lost
would be
about
so
20 hours.
scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been really hard, especially when you have little kids. You have things going on, you have a busy life. I can't imagine.
Yeah. So I think they're trying to work that out now because I know they're changing the curriculum, the amount of hours required. They're trying to figure out a solution to where, with the pandemic still going on, that could be an option and the classes can match. So you can take module 1, 2, and 3 in person, 4, 5, and 6 online, and I'll have to take like extra classes here or borrow a little bit of this class to make up your full hours and make sure you cover down on all of the requirements. So it's kind of messy right now, but we did it. We got through it.
So, did you feel like there was anything in the curriculum that was lacking or anything that surprised you, or was it kind of just what you expected it to be?
I think a lot of it is what I expected, and I think that that's because I consume so much information ahead of time. I think it was more shocking for Kyle. Like I had told you, I'd listened to your podcast previously. Any book I could get my hands on, any podcast for years I've been listening to. So a lot of it is what I already knew, but at the same time, like a lot of the trauma, I think that that's what the training on the trauma and looking for signs of abuse and all of that, that still really got to me in the training, even though I knew that that was something that I should expect from it. A lot of it too was a lot of people who foster and adopt haven't been parents before. So a lot of it was just kind of learning how to be a parent. Overall, I would say it was pretty close to what I expected though.
Yeah, I do really feel like people who are interested in foster care or adopting consume all of the information. Like every single prospective foster or adoptive parent I know has scoured the internet for podcasts, YouTube videos, books, all of it. So it sounds like you fit right in.
Yeah, and I can't get enough, honestly, because every situation is so different and unique. I mean, I've never listened to one podcast that I thought, oh, yeah, this sounds like this podcast or this sounds like this because it's all so different.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in Ohio, are you allowed to choose an agency or work directly with your county or your state, or how does it work there?
So you get to choose your agency. You can go through your county. You can go through a private agency. We went through our county. That was just the easiest resource for us. And kind of from what I researched was going to be the quickest avenue. I don't know anyone in Ohio who's been through a private agency, so I can't speak to what that's about. But being through our county, we've talked a little bit about how we're doing a couple different routes with adoption, but actually getting a foster placement would come just from our county.
Okay, so I'm not sure how that all fits together because I know one of the main topics that we decided that it would be important to touch on was the route through foster care to adoption. So you're saying that foster placements only come through the county. What about like pre-adoptive placements? Where do they come through a private agency, or how does that work?
So it gets a little confusing. So we're going through our county and we're kind of dual rolled here to where we are open to accepting foster placements from our county, but we are actively pursuing adoption. We're working, our county will work with us to get in touch with any county to where there is a child available for adoption, but at the same time, we're going through Adopt US Kids. It's a national website. It sounds like not a ton of people know about it, which It's crazy because we had to sign 10 forms, I think, stating that we knew what this agency was, we knew what they did, we knew that this was a route that we could take, and I don't think that every single state is aware of it. So they are a national agency, and any child who is free and legally cleared for adoption, their agency at the state level can work with this national agency, and they can kind of let everyone know, hey, this child is available. And if you're licensed, you can inquire about them, or they can see your profile and they can reach out to you and say, hey, we think you'd be a good match. And then you can go from there.
Okay. So are you actively pursuing a child or children on Adopt Us Kids?
Yes. So there's a few agencies that we're working with, but the process is very slow. They're very careful with, just because you inquire or they inquire for you to see if you're interested doesn't mean anything's going to go forward. At that point, if the agency through Adopt US Kids decides that we might be a good fit for a child, they request our home study. And then if they still say, yes, we still think you're a good fit, because on the actual website, you have a profile and it's pretty brief, just stating that you're licensed and you have all of that paperwork in there. And then you give your own summary. So they request your home study. And once they decide, yes, we still think that you would be a match, they send the file for the child. And then you kind of go from there. Currently, it's a little bit at a standstill right now, but there is a little boy in the Ohio area, and we have already gone through that initial process, and we are moving forward with him, but there's been some hiccup. Without giving too much away, just the thought of adoption is really frightening to him, so they're really working with him to get him ready to be in the mindset to be adopted, to see if we could still move forward.
Wow. The whole thing is so fascinating. I'm definitely familiar with Adopt Us Kids and like some of the state heart galleries as well. And I've definitely been on the website, but I haven't known or personally talked to anybody who's started the process or gone through the process. So if they decide that you are a good fit and they'd like to move forward, or he would like to move forward, I mean, I'd imagine if he's old enough to take a look at your information, will they let him do that, or will they kind of make the decision for him, or do you know?
As far as I'm aware, it's kind of a case by case basis. So this child is old enough to understand it all. I spoke with, and he is older than my kids currently. So with that, there were some additional conversations. I had additional questions. I wanted to know more about him and to make sure that he would fit into this dynamic well with having younger siblings, since it is out of birth order. I spoke with his foster mom for quite a while. It's been about 3 weeks, and got a better sense of where he is at academically, in his personal life, how he's coping with everything that he's gone through. And his agent talked to him further about the idea of adoption, and he has been having a hard time processing it. So the next steps that I have been made aware of is he's doing some counseling to kind of get him more prepared for adoption. And then when he's in a good place to feel that he's ready to take the next steps, we would meet with him. So it's a slow roll. It would be us meeting with him, and if that goes well and he feels like he's comfortable enough to meet with us again, there's additional meetings, and then it's the process of him coming and seeing our house, and then spending the night for a day, a weekend, a week, and then very slowly getting him to the place where he's ready to come into our home full time.
That was going to be my next question is, do you get to meet him and spend time with him beforehand? Or is it just like all of a sudden he's in your home and there he is and he's ready to be adopted?
I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I know if we were to get involved with a child over state borders, it It all varies on the severity of the situation. They like for the potential adoptive parents to meet the child, but I mean, I haven't worked enough with anyone out of state, so I might have this wrong, but from what our agency has discussed, it's a quicker process because we don't have the luxury of just meeting and kind of slowly getting them transitioned. It's quicker but harder to go through the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I'm also curious because you said this boy, and again, I don't want to give away too much information, but he's not too terribly far from where you live, right?
No, he's less than 30 minutes. I don't know exactly where, but pretty close.
Okay, because I know I have seen like on the Facebook foster parent groups people who would inquire about children on adoptive kids that are, states and states away across the country. So I'm wondering how that would look. Are they able to spend time with each other before they, both make the decision that adoption is the best route? Or is it just like, bam, here you are, now you're a family?
I think it varies on a case by case basis. There was one child that from Pennsylvania that we were talking with his agency about, and that was their goal for him. If we were to move forward, they really wanted us to come out and spend time with him. And then at that point, they would assess, okay, is he ready to go into their home? Do they need another meeting? But obviously it gets more complicated when you can't just go visit time and time and time again. And then obviously you can't take them with you and send them back to their state over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. That's so fascinating. So from how I understand it, you're kind of going three different routes. You're going the Adopt Us Kids route, and then through, did you say it was your state or your county that you foster?
Our county.
Okay, so through your county, you can do either traditional foster care or foster to adopt, quote unquote, because I'm not sure if that's what it's called there, on children who are legally free for adoption. Did I get that all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about that because I feel like that's one of the topics that's kind of not so much hidden, but it's less talked about in foster care. And I know a lot of people look for or seek out a program like that, but they just either one, don't know if it exists where they live, or two, don't know the details or how to get involved. So how did you learn of that program? Did they tell you about it in the training?
I don't know how I first came about that information. I'm sure I knew it ahead of time.
Because you were researching.
Yeah. I reached out before we signed up for the classes. I reached out to my county and got some information when we were making the decision to go through our county or seek out a private agency. Yeah, so there's the route of just traditional foster care and there's fostering to adopt. I think a lot of people aren't aware that adoption can really be an option in all of this. They think, without doing the research, when you're in foster care, you assume that children are always coming in and out of your home. And why that might be the case sometimes, adoption's definitely a real thing that can come out of it.
Yes, I feel like there are quite a few people in the foster care world whose ultimate goal is to adopt, but also I feel like those people are sometimes not really shunned, but they're looked down upon because obviously the main goal of foster care is reunification. And so people sometimes are hesitant to admit that, yes, I would like to adopt. In my opinion, personally, and the reason this is my opinion is because this is what we're experiencing and this is what we're living through since we've been foster parents, is our ultimate goal is to adopt. But at the same time, if we become aware of the fact that the biological family is ready to parent and they're able to raise their children, we also support reunification. And I think there are a lot of people like me who are kind of in that same boat, but are afraid to just out and say, we do want to adopt if the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, we're in that same situation. Same thing. We definitely want to adopt, but we are definitely open to foster care, short-term, long-term placement. if they don't know where the case is going, we're okay with that. And that's not something that I initially thought I would want to do. Because, everyone says, oh, I could never foster because I could never imagine losing the child in our
Mm-hmm.
home. And that was kind of before I started really researching, that was why I was so scared of it. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall in love with this child and it's going to be so hard. But I think sometimes if you're called to do something, things are going to be hard. And if the parent is ready and able to parent their child again, and I get to be a part of that at all, that's enough for me. That's God's work in itself.
Yeah, I've actually been doing quite a bit of thinking into that situation. That exact situation happened to us. We fostered a 10-week-old baby girl. It was our first placement. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what to expect. And we basically just kind of raised her as our own, and we absolutely fell in love with her. And then we made the mistake of listening to certain state employees who told us that, oh, babies always get adopted. It's rare for babies to be reunified. And so then, of course, we had our hopes up, and she went back to live with a grandmother permanently. And I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm not really sure why, but at the time, it legitimately felt like a death to me, like a death had occurred. It was one of the worst times in my entire life. It was absolutely awful. But now, as I'm looking back, I know that somebody who really loves her is taking care of her and she's doing really well. And now it's been several years and it's almost like she doesn't exist anymore because I knew her as a little baby and now she's like a toddler, which is so weird to me. I don't know, it's crazy the thoughts that go on in your head.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure at some point we'll go through that as well. It's funny, when we first started this journey, I thought, okay, one child, because we had the twins, I thought, okay, we could probably handle one. But then my heart just really said, open your heart to two. And my husband, Kyle, and I were going to turn in our initial paperwork to where, and this can change, but they ask, okay, upon first thoughts, how many children, age ranges, all that stuff. And I had circled one, and we were in the car and I had a pen and I didn't show him, but I circled two and I was going to show him right when we were turning it in to see if the thought freaked him out or what his thoughts were, because we never thought past one. And we get to the agency and I say, hey, I have something to tell you. And he said, you think I didn't see you do that?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. He said, I am open to two as well. And I think part of that is because if we foster two, if we adopt two, that's great. But if we adopt one child, I want to have the opportunity to also foster.
Okay. Well, and I know we talked about this too when we first met, keeping birth order between biological children and foster or adopted children. And you're doing it differently than what you hear most people suggest. But at the same time, I am kind of agreeing with how you're doing it. So, did you also hear many people suggest to maintain birth order and only foster or adopt children younger than your biological children?
Pretty much everybody.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people. It's funny because when people learn that we're doing this, they say, oh my goodness, you're going to have three children, three and under, or whatever age they think of. And I think, oh no. And I tell them, and everyone's surprised. Two reasons we're doing it this way. One, I just feel like that's where my heart is at and what God has called me to do, because there's such a need, obviously, to foster and adopt all ages, but older ages a lot of times get looked over. A lot of people want younger kids, and we were blessed to have two of them. So I thought, okay, I want to return that and give that to somebody who might not have the same opportunity as a young child. And it just made sense for us because Christian and June, maybe this would change if they weren't so loving and accepting, but I just think that they would do great with an older child. I've seen them around younger children and the jealousy kicks in sometimes, but if there's an older child at our house, anybody their age or older, there's none of that. So it kind of made sense for us and our dynamic. I think that they'll barely remember this process of bringing a child into a home, if at all. So I think at this point, it's going to happen organically to where it's going to always feel like this child's been a part of the family versus if we were to do it when they were a little older.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we talked about this before too. There's a woman, I watch her YouTube videos, and she's also in Ohio. And I feel like she's kind of similar to the way that your family is doing it. They have two younger biological children, but they're not twins, they're just younger. And then they foster older kids. And I mean, of course, she's only showing her highlight reel on YouTube most of the time, but it really seems like it's not a bad idea like everybody else makes it out to be. It seems like it really could work. And especially when you're doing it for the right reasons, like it obviously seems like you are.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is us trying to prepare Christian and June as much as we can. We talk about it as much. I don't know how much they're absorbing, but we talk about it all the time. And if what we're saying doesn't click with them, that's fine. No time lost really. But if anything clicks with them at all, I think it'll help them be better prepared. It's so funny because we have bunk beds because the children that we're hoping to have in our home are in the age ranges where bunk beds are appropriate. And Christian, one day, knowing that babies have cribs and not understanding fully what's going on, went into the room that we had set up and said, "This is for the baby." And I said, "Well, it's not really for a baby." He said, "It's bigger than my bed." And I was like, I know, it's a hard concept.
He was starting to put it together.
Yes. So then we kind of had a further conversation. I don't think it went anywhere, but it was nice to see that he's at least aware that this is coming.
That is so cool. I'm so excited to hear how they react and just kind of how your family starts to grow. Oh, and just to double check, you haven't yet gotten a foster placement call yet, right?
No, we haven't. That's been kind of the whole process of this, because I guess when I want to do something and I put my heart into it, I am go, 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 excited, and nothing's really happened yet. So that's been kind of tough. I've really just been, for the first handful of weeks, I was looking at my phone all the time to see if we had a call. And now I've kind of learned to let that go. We've talked to a few different agencies who have requested our home study and then gotten back to us on the child we were looking at potentially getting and saying, "Oh, for these reasons, we don't feel like your family would be the right fit." And that's been kind of hard, but I am just trusting that God has timing in all of this. And when it's meant to be, it's going to be.
I feel like situations like this, it's kind of like when it rains, it pours, for lack of better words. And I imagine you getting like 5 calls for 5 different children at once in like the same day.
Yeah, that would be kind of great and terrifying at the same time.
I think so too. So have you done any preparation for your twins? I know they're still pretty young, and we kind of talked about the fact that they only understand it to a certain extent, but the day that a new child moves in, do you have any plans or any idea of how you'll say that to them or how you'll introduce them?
I don't necessarily have a full-on plan. I think once we know kind of what route we're going, I'll be able to better assess how to address the situation with them. If it's a call, like, "Hey, we have a child, you have a few hours," it's going to kind of be a shock to the system. We talk about that from time to time. I say, and they don't know and they don't really pay attention, but I'll say, "How would you feel if we had someone here staying the night?" And they'll kind of be like, "Yeah, whatever." So I don't think they fully get it. But if we go the route to where we are getting a placement through the adoption route, or say this little boy that we've been pursuing, they'll have a lot more time to get the grasp of it. So I think we're just going to have to play it by ear.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, then on the flip side, if you have a foster child who ends up being reunified, do you worry about how that will affect them as well? Or do you feel like maybe it will help them build resiliency? What are your thoughts on that?
Both. I worry a lot on how they'll react to it, especially if it's a long-term placement. I think if it were a few weeks, a month, something short, I think that they would ask and kind of go on about life until they got a little bit older and understood more of it. I do worry about how they'd react to a child going back, but I think at that time they'll be a little bit older and we'll be able to have the conversation of this is the kind of family that we are and this is what we do, and we just help them go back to their mommy and daddy. And if mommy and daddy was in trouble or sick or there was something wrong, we would want someone to take care of you guys for a little while and just kind of introduce it in that way. I've gone through the scenario in my head a few times, but they're so young and we just have no idea when this will happen. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yes, yes. So do you all plan on having more biological children, or do you know?
In my mind, yes, but I think it's going to depend on what adoption looks like. So we in what fostering looks like too, if we adopt and we say yes, we want to go straight into fostering at the same time, or if we end up adopting too, all of that would just be a lot. So I think we're going to have to assess once we get a child in our homes and see where we're at as a family. But I am definitely open to it. I have always envisioned having a large family. I love the movie Growing Up Cheaper by the Dozen. I remember thinking that is what I want my life to be like. I mean, I don't want that anymore, but I definitely want more kids.
Do you have a big car?
We have an SUV that sits 7. My husband has an SUV that sits 6. I think we might have to get rid of his SUV and upgrade me to a minivan at some
All
point.
right.
Yeah, I'm definitely not opposed to it.
That's so great. I love that. And the next thing after that, I always feel like too, is a bigger house with more bedrooms. That's like the progression of foster care and adoption.
So we did it backwards. Our house right now, we just built it a little over a year ago. We're in the process of finishing our basement, and we have room to make space in our basement a bedroom, and we have an office downstairs that could be a bedroom. So there's 4 bedrooms upstairs, including the master, and the potential for 2 more. We're not doing that yet, but we've just thought in the back of our heads, if we needed to, it's an option.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome to have that as an option. I just know I'm going to send you a message like a year from now and you're going to be like, oh, yeah, it's great. We've got 8 kids, all ages, babies to teenagers. That's going to be how it happens, I bet.
That would be my dream. Also a little bit chaotic, but
That's funny. So I would like to know, is there anything that you would tell people who are on the edge or considering signing up to be a foster home or an adoptive home? Any advice, any words of encouragement or wisdom?
yeah. So this is definitely not for the faint of heart or something to take lightly, but I think people at the same time aren't aware of how many people can also do this and be a resource. You could be a single parent. It doesn't have to be a perfect family to adopt or go this route. It's not a big financial burden. I think that's a few questions that I've gotten is, what does the financial aspect of this look like? Because a lot of people just equate adoption with the financial aspect that you get with international adoption. So it just sounds like it's going to be $30, $40, $50,000, and it's not like that at all. The costs are minimal. The amount of children that really need a home are far greater than anyone could really imagine. So if your heart is even a little bit open to it, I would really just meditate on that and pray about it and see if God leads you in that direction. I think the more people who become aware of the different resources and the options available, hopefully the more people will consider it and move forward with it. And hopefully there will be less children in this situation and more homes.
Yes. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, the financial aspect of it, because that's another thing that I don't think it's talked about a whole lot. But I know in most states or in most counties with the state, county, or even private agencies, you do get a stipend. A lot of times they'll help you with food like WIC or food stamps. A lot of times they'll help you with daycare for children who are younger than school age. You're absolutely right. There are a ton of resources, not only for foster care, but also for adoption. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, there's a lot of, we've learned, and I didn't know this. I didn't even know. I knew that the cost was minimal, but I didn't know until we did our training that you got helped along the way as well. But there's also post-adoption resources. A lot of times, if you think the child might need extensive medical care or maybe some counseling, because obviously it's a huge transition, that could be paid for by the state. So I definitely encourage people to look into it. Like I said, you don't have to be perfect. We're not perfect. And we just have a heart for it. And we're excited to get started.
Cool. I'm excited for you. If any of the listeners would like to contact you after the episode airs, would you be okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely have anyone reach out with any questions.
Okay. Where can they find you?
The easiest way would probably be to reach me by email. You have my email, Alex. It's Kayla, Kayla.bias@gmail.com.
Okay, cool. I will put that in the description of the podcast. And once again, thank you so much for hanging out. And I'm really excited for you to start getting those calls and kind of make more progress towards the adoption. And I hope we can maybe do a follow-up one day. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yes, absolutely. Of course. I would like to give once again a huge shout out to my podcast editor, Ruben. He is saving my life once again, like he always does. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving 5 stars on Apple Podcast or whichever podcast platform you listen on, as well as some kind words or some critical words, or just give us your thoughts and let us know what you want to hear. Have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you next time.